Hi, it's Andy again, and today we are looking at Romans a little deeper. Again, this introductory section of Romans 1, of Romans, and of Romans 1. And as we look at the introduction, we are talking about the setting. Yesterday's video was about the who and the what, I guess, and now today we're going to do the when and the where. So the when, we can't determine exactly the exact date that Paul wrote Romans, but it was somewhere between 54 and 58 AD. We can deduce that because of some clues that are in the Bible and just some general thoughts about history as well. Many believe it was 57 AD, but again, we really can't pinpoint down any more than a range of just a few years. One of the big clues is that the proconsul or governor was Gallio, and he was appointed the governor of this particular region where Paul was in 51 or 52 AD. When we add to that some time that Paul spent in Ephesus, which we find in, for instance, Acts chapter 19 and 20, in Acts chapter 20, verse 31, Paul says that he's lived in Ephesus for part of 3 years, we can begin to deduce a general time frame given some of the other travels that Paul did in the meantime. So now what's interesting about Gallio is not that he was just a Roman emperor, which we would have to draw information from Roman history and whatever, but he's actually mentioned in the Bible in Acts chapter 18, verse 12, while Paul was in Corinth. He was brought before Gallio as or Gallio, I should say, sorry, Gallio as a possible prisoner because of some things that were going on. So again, Paul traveled at various times. We know he was before Gallio, and so we can deduce the general time frame for 54 to 58 AD. Again, many people will say it's about 57 AD. So that gives us a little bit of the when, and I've already hinted a little bit at the where for Romans as we think about the setting. The where is within the context of Corinth is where this was written, but again, there's two wheres. Just like there were two whos, there's two wheres. Where was this written? To whom was this written? Well, it was written to Rome. We've established that with the who, really, and specifically to the church in Rome. But Paul wrote this from Greece and specifically from Corinth. Now, as I mentioned in Sunday's sermon, one of the interesting things about this particular letter is that Paul was writing to a church that he had not yet visited. He was writing to a church that he did not start, which was generally what he did when he wrote back to the church at Ephesus, when he wrote back to the church at Corinth, etc. He wrote to churches that he had helped establish, but we know per Romans 1:12 that Paul had yet to visit Rome, even though he had desired to do so for quite some time. So we know that Paul wrote this letter from Greece, and we can deduce even further from Romans 16:23 that it was from Corinth, because in Romans 16:23, one of the people that Paul sends a greeting to is Gaius, and Gaius is mentioned in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 14, as one of the ones that Paul baptized when he had visited Corinth. Now, Corinth was a very important city for Paul. It was a very important city for commerce. It was on a specific trade route, and what made Corinth so vibrant and so important was that it was a port city, not just one port, but it actually had two ports. It sat on a part of Greece where the Mediterranean Sea came up to it from the west, and so the people could enter into the western port of Corinth and then go back to the Mediterranean Sea, back towards, say, Israel or whatever. But there was also, across a short bit of land, you could go into the Gulf that would take you out to the Mediterranean Sea towards the east, which would then take you to Rome and on around to Spain. So Corinth was a very, very important place, and it was the hub of Paul's ministry once he established his base there. In fact, in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, when certain leaders had come in and had begun to sway the people away from Paul, Paul reminded them that he had come to them, and specifically that he had made Corinth, this hub for ministry, he says that we have extended our barriers from you. We have gone beyond limitations from you in 2 Corinthians chapter 10. Specifically, you can read verses 13 through 16 for that. So Paul, now having said that he has completed his ministry in the eastern regions, I think earlier I said from the western side, I have to back that up. But anyway, Paul had completed his ministry from the eastern regions of the Mediterranean. He is now looking to pass through and use the western port and go to the western side towards Rome, and ultimately allow Rome to be that port. So you probably heard the phrase, all roads lead to Rome. Well, if that is true, the reverse of that is true, that all roads lead away from Rome. And what Paul wanted to do was use that base of roads, that network of roads that was used by the Roman military and basically allowed for safe travel, the Pax Romana, that he would be able to extend the gospel, to share the gospel into further regions as he established his base from Rome.